Hi everyone, I just thought I'd shoot a video on the setup I have here for my Leopard Gecko. This is a BioActive setup. The tank size is a glass terrarium. I've chosen the Thermostat brand one just because it's perfectly designed for BioActive setups. And the size of it is 90 centimetre length by 60 centimetre height and 45 centimetre width, I think it is. So as you can see, we've got a lot going on in there. It's really exciting. I've really enjoyed creating this, and I hope that my gecko is going to enjoy it and thrive. He is approximately 6 months old now. I had him when I've had him now for 3 months, so he's been in quarantine. There is a video of his quarantine setup on my YouTube channel, which is my Leopard Gecko journey. So there's a video on there on his quarantine setup and also feeding. So we have on this side is, I'll tell you what, I'll go from top to bottom. So up here we have the lighting setup. Now we have this 15 watt Jungle Dawn LED, which is essential for plant growth. We at the back of that to the left on this warm side, at the back we have the 7% Shade Dweller UVB and 50 watt dome halogen bulb for his heat source. I do use a under tank heater just on the side, on the outside of the tank, just to add a bit more thermo regulation for the substrate and the cleanup crew. I mean, these are quite controversial because they do only give surface heat. It's not like deep penetration heat like you get from the halogen bulbs or the deep heat projectors. But for the purposes what I need, it'll suffice. But I wouldn't recommend using an under tank heater as your only source. Unless it's just for quarantine and you say using a plastic tub, then that's okay because it's only temporary. But for permanent setups, you ideally need deep heat projectors or the dome-shaped bulbs like this one here. There's also ceramic heat emitters as well, which are good. Okay, so his thermometers. Now, I set this up 6 days ago. So moving in day is tomorrow, and that thermometer over there where we can see it's 31.6 centigrade. It is quite warm outside at the moment, so that obviously will affect the temps. But that thermometer measures his basking spot, just to get an accurate reading of the basking zone. And the ideal sort of range for the basking zone is from about 31 up to about 35. So that's well within range there. This thermometer here, that's the ambient temperature in the warm zone. So ambient temperature's ideal range is from about 26 up to 30 degrees. So we're doing okay there. And then I'll just press a little button here and it'll give the cool side. So the cool side at the moment, ambient temperature is 23.7. And ranges for the cool side again range from about 20, 21 up to 24 on the cool side. So temperatures on both sides are doing great. Humidity, we have the humidity hygrometer here, and at the moment that is at 50%, which is perfect. You don't want humidity really to go less than 35, because it can cause shedding problems. They rely on a bit of moisture to have a proper shed. And also if the humidity is too high, so if it's above 65, 70, then it can cause respiratory problems, and we don't want that. So that's the hygrometer, humidity and temps. So they're all set, and then we've got the lighting there and the heat source. Now the heat source is connected to a dimmer thermostat, which is here. Now, always, it's so important to use a thermostat for any heat source for your gecko enclosure. And for this type of heat source, so the basking light, the clamp light, and it has to be connected to a dimming thermostat. With the mat stats, they are a no-go for the type of heat that I'm using. So the dimming thermostat allows me to set the temperature to what I want it at. Now that's currently set to about 33 degrees centigrade. So if the temperature goes above that, then obviously the heat will turn off. And the little red light there where it says heat in the top right corner, that means that it's still allowing more heat to go into the enclosure. Once it hits that 33, the heat shuts off. So it's a safety measure really. And if you don't have a thermostat, well, obviously you're not going to know how hot it's going to, there's not going to be a control on the heat, and you don't want blowouts and that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm going to now open his enclosure. Now I sort of think I confused myself a bit here. The drainage layer, this layer here, is, you can see where there's moisture retained after me watering the plants and also after me setting it up last Monday. There's still a bit of moisture. It's kind of okay that, because it means that there's little humidity pockets, so that moisture then through the heat will evaporate and get put back into the atmosphere, which will contribute to humidity. So it's kind of like a sort of a cycle humidity regulator thing, as long as the humidity doesn't get too high. But also the plants, they will create a little bit more humidity as well. So the purpose of this drainage layer, really, I've used hydro balls and hydro fleece, is obviously to make sure that it doesn't go too out of control with the water levels, which it won't do anyway, because geckos are used to sort of dry, arid environments. Drainage layers are more for crested geckos, or like your frogs, that type of thing, amphibians. But I think after reading care files on crested geckos, I must have mixed up and just autopilot made me put this drainage layer in. It's not essential, but it can be done. And the purpose of this hydro fleece is to prevent the roots of the plants from mixing in with the drainage layer, the clay balls. So they can get all the nutrients and the moisture from the soil above. So that's the sort of the drainage layer. Now for the substrate, I've used across the whole sort of substrate, I've used a good 5 centimeters really. Could have used a bit more, but went for a couple of inches, a few inches of Earth Mix Arid by Arcadia. There are other forms similar. There's Repy Soil, I think, by ProRep. And there's also Terra Sahara by the BioDude, which can be used. I went for the Earth Mix Arid by Arcadia, as it's recommended for leopard geckos, bioactive terrariums. Can be used for naturalistic enclosures as well. So that is across the whole. So I used a layer of the arid soil, and then on top of that, we have different zones. Now in the warm zone, I wanted to use some excavator clay sand, which is ideal for creating burrowing areas. And you can see here that I've used one of his old hides and buried it underneath the clay soil to create like a sort of a burrow effect. And there are 3 of these burrows all in his warm zone. So there's one just there, there's another one just behind there, and then there's another one just to the right of there, using a pod that I had in some of the accessories that I bought online. So this area here is his warm zone. Drier, more arid, more sort of like his natural environment. Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, which is where leopard geckos come from. And I've used for plants, I'll go into a bit more about plants in a sec, but I've put the succulent plants on the warm side because they don't mind warm temperatures and dry conditions. They don't need watering. Like, I water them once a week, but they only need just a little bit of water to keep them going. So they're generally low maintenance. And there's some pebbles going on there. We also have sphagnum moss in the substrate. So the earth soil, and that's mixed with sphagnum moss. Then the excavator clay in the warm zone. The excavator clay is mixed with about 30% soil, earth mix soil, with a little bit of water to create that kind of clay sort of texture. And I use that mixture then to create the burrowing sort of hills and stuff in that little corner there. Then in the center we have his humid zone. Now the layer here on the top layer is just a bit of a mix really. We have some bits of corkback pieces, some leaf litter, some sphagnum moss, some coconut husk, just a little bit. You don't want too much of that because, again, it's not like an equatorial sort of foresty environment here. We're talking about leopard geckos. You can use a lot of coconut fibre for crested geckos, but for this humid zone I just thought I'd add a little bit in just to add a bit of extra texture and stuff to the substrate and sort of enhance that humidity for the humid zone. He does have a humid hide at the back, which I've put some sphagnum moss in. That will have dried by now, but there's his little sort of shrine. It's kind of got like a Zen type feel to it, and the entrance to it is just underneath, just behind that branch. But there's also plenty of hiding places around his plants, and when I water them once a week, that creates a bit of extra moisture, so that can, extra bit of humid hide sort of thing there when I water the plants. Also with this kind of substrate, it's good for the cleanup crew because it feeds them and provides hiding places for them and places to kind of breed. Now for cleanup crew, I've used isopods, springtails, and dwarf white tropical woodlice, which are just like little tiny bugs which go in there and they basically break down the organic matter, which regenerates the soil, which also is good for the plants, which in turn is good for the gecko. So it all kind of looks after itself. That's the whole purpose, really, of BioActive. I mean, it's not a case of just throwing in some substrate and some insects and, you know, call it a day. There is maintenance involved, but compared to a sterile setup, I think for a BioActive, I think there is a little bit less, well, a lot less maintenance involved, and it's more natural as well. It's more like their wild environment. So here is his water dish. Now I haven't filled it up yet because obviously he's not in there, but I'll put some water in there tomorrow. It's just like a little pod, which came with some accessories that I bought. Then we have 2 cool hides at the back. So when I ordered his stuff initially, the cork tube was actually quite big for what I needed, so I cut it into 3 small bits. So there's 2 there. I suppose that one can be sort of a mix of a humid hide and a cool hide, really. They're both in his cool zone. And you can't really see it, but at the back of them is another sort of log with like a tunnel going through. So it's kind of, you know, like a bit burrowy, bit sort of hidey, placey sort of thing, which geckos like. They're very solitary creatures. So this is his cool zone. And again, similar to the humid zone, I've added some spag moss, some leaf litter, and some bits of cork wood. And just threw in some leftover soil, scattered it around the place. Wasn't too fussy about placing things where. Just went for that natural kind of look, really. And I love being creative and a bit wild, so it worked out well. Now plants, we have so far, they're all still looking good, and they've been in here for 6 days now, so I'm pleased about that. This plant here is a jade plant. All the plants that I've used, bar the sedge grass, which is that grass at the back there, all of them sort of are native to Africa. And the thing, what I read on the internet from a Gecko website about plants, the best plants to use, I selected these ones out of that list. And the advice from there was to use plants which are from the same sort of country or region, because they tend to grow better that way, rather than, say, having one plant from Mexico, one plant from Europe, another plant from Asia. There's more chance, unless they're widely spaced apart. But obviously, although this is a large enclosure, you know, there's quite a few plants in there, so I didn't want to have a full mix going on. So I chose plants carefully which are from the same sort of regions, with the aim of them working better together and not dying, basically, lasting longer. So that's the jade plant. Then we have the string of pearls, which again is a succulent, and that eventually will spread, crawl over those logs, over the pod and that sort of thing. It's kind of like a mat. So, and great for creating like hiding places and that sort of thing as well. Obviously, they'll need to be trimmed back to, you know, I can't just let it go out of control. Speaking of which, this guy here is a snake plant, another native of Africa. This is great for decoration because it just looks so majestic and just so zen. It's just got everything nature about it, so I loved it. Now these do very hard to kill, so they're great to have in a BioActive. They're probably more than likely to survive. But they can grow pretty wild if they're left to their own devices. So obviously when it goes to a bit OTT height, I'll have to cut it back a little bit. Then we have the sedge grass. Now this is an experiment because this is from New Zealand, which is sort of a country similar to the UK with temperate climates. But after reading online, I found that it can be used in Leopard Gecko BioActives and is quite hardy. I mean, it's looking a little bit wilty there. I have given it lots of water. So that's an experiment, but I just, for aesthetics and for cover and that sort of thing, I just thought it would look good in there. So that's the sedge grass. Then we have some more succulents. This is a zebra plant, again from Africa. It's in the aloe family, so used to dry conditions, pretty much looks after itself. Will need some pruning because that will grow much bigger than what it is. There's another one of those at the back in the corner there. And then finally we have the lace aloe here. This one is really, I found when I was touching up on these this morning and just adding a bit more soil around them just to firm the base and doing a bit of watering, I found that this one has really sort of got its roots solid in the ground, and I've noticed that it's actually grown as well. It looks quite happy there, so I'm sure it'll do fine. That is a lace aloe. Again, succulents, easy to sort of add to a Leopard Gecko BioActive enclosure because they're used to drier conditions. They don't need a lot of maintenance, and watering is maybe, I tend to water all these once a week, but some can even go 2 weeks, but it's just, you know, routine, isn't it? Part of the weekly routine is to water the plants. So there we are, that's basically it. I've used a cork background just to give it that natural kind of look, and the glass is covered with like a sort of a black film on the outside, so which I think gives it that cool kind of look. And then obviously the wires at the back are for his you know, temperature probes and his hygrometer probe. So his hygrometer probe is placed there, and we have 2 thermostat probes placed in his warm zone, one just above his pebble there and one in his basking sort of area, the, you know, the center of the warm zone there. And then we have another one which is located in the cool zone. And also when I'm setting up, the probe, the sensor probe of the thermostat is located in the cool end of the enclosure. And then we basically have all the sort of set up for a good thermal gradient, a good humidity gradient, good lighting setup, and I'm just so excited about getting him in there tomorrow. So that's basically it on the setup for my new BioActive enclosure. Glad you enjoyed. This will be put on YouTube and my Leopard Gecko journey. Find me on there and subscribe. Thank you.